There you go. There you have it. I want to thank you all for giving up some of your Sunday afternoon and or evening to spend time with us. This is the first of two small book fair events connected to Bamboo Dart Press and Pelekinesis. Before I go any further, I want to say a big, big shout out to Romaine Washington, who very graciously volunteered her Zoom account so that we can have this session. So thank you so much, Romaine. This afternoon, we're going to be focusing on Bamboo Dart Press authors. And Bamboo Dart Press is this very cool collaboration between Pelekinesis Press and Shrimper Records. And as you think about vinyl, and those of you remember what vinyl was and is like, I'm just going to show you what the Bamboo Dart books look like. These are absolutely gorgeous little chapbooks that look like golden books, little golden books, if you remember those, or for those of us who remember the 45, they look like single LP little album covers. And Bamboo Dart Press works with authors in a variety of ways. There's poetry, there's hybrid work, there's photography, flash fiction, flash nonfiction, and so on. And I'm hoping you have lots of questions about the press, but before I go any further, I want to introduce to you our wonderful authors who are going to be sharing a little bit about their writing. Some of you may know that I'm a big fan of Dada, and Tristan Tzara had this idea that you could make a poem by throwing pieces of a newspaper article into a bag, shaking everything up, and then pulling the words out. Well, I'm going to do that with the order of presentation. So here are the names of the writers. In they go into the Tristan Tzara bag. And let's see who our first author is going to be. I promise this is not affixed. Anyway, well, back to me. I'm going to use my few minutes to talk with you a little bit about process. And there are two takeaways that I want for you to take away. Number one, don't throw anything out if you're a writer. Don't delete your files. Keep all the versions of your big projects because you may end up using the parts that you cut out. Two, when writing about small towns, use what you know, but combine features of different small towns to create a richer effect. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about Rescue Plan, which is my piece with Bamboo Dart Press. This started out as a chapter of my first novel. And it was actually a point of view chapter from a minor character who was a teenager, and I ended up cutting it. But as often happens, those of you who've written big works know, you cut something out and then it stays with you. I was really intrigued by this character. And after the novel got published, I kept on working on Gomer's story. Gomer is the hero. And he grew in complexity, as did the household, as did his neighborhood. And this little chapter just got bigger and bigger and bigger until I had something called a novelette. And a novelette, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that form, which is a little bit of an unusual form, is a very, very long short story of about 13,000 words. So it's too short to be a novella, but it's too long comfortably to be a short story. So the format of the chapbook, which it's a complete little book, but it's not a big book, was the perfect place for Gomer, who was a teenager and who was also short for his age, to tell his story. Now, let's talk about the town. Rescue Plan and my first novel, The Puppet Turners, both take place in a very strange little town, which is actually a mashup of three different places. Narrow Interior is a New England town, but it shares features not only with Northampton, Massachusetts, which is where I went to college, but with Riverside, California, where I worked for 30 years, as some of you know, and with Coopeville, Washington, which is where I currently live. Like many small towns, Narrow Interior has a set of residents who are very wealthy and who have a second home there. But there are also the regular residents of the town who are much less privileged and much less sophisticated. And as a result, there's a clash of cultures that happens in community meetings and community interactions. And as a writer, I'm really interested in that. I'm really interested in that contradiction, that troubled interaction that takes place between different people living in the same place. The other thing about Narrow Interior is that it is the site of the foundation of a now almost forgotten religion that combined elements of Anabaptist Christianity, that's the Amish, for example, with elements of Shinto and popular Japanese culture, because the founder of this religion was part Japanese and part German. Now, Gomer has certain, what do I want to say, has certain spiritual qualities that he doesn't fully understand. But because of those powers, he's able to see things about this town. And something else that fascinates me about small towns is, I think more so than big cities, they are haunted by their history, whatever that history might be. And so the small town becomes a place to explore those hidden histories, those repressed histories that a town is trying to hide about itself. So that's Rescue Plan. And that's enough about me. Let's hear from somebody else. And our next speaker is Ruth. Ruth, take it away.
Hi, I'm really honored to be here and to be coming on board into the Bamboo Dart Press family. My book is forthcoming soon, and it's titled After the Dome Fire. Some of you may remember in 2020, there was a massive wildfire in the Mojave Desert that basically burned to a crisp what was formerly the world's largest Joshua Tree forest, 26,000 acres. And the title of my book is taken from that. And all of the poems focus around a central metaphor of wildfire in the desert. And I weave this in also with my own experiences, formerly working as a wildland firefighter for the Bureau of Land Management California Desert District. So I had actually worked on fires in that very area where the Dome Fire had burned. So I'm going to read one of the poems from the chapbook. Dome Fire. Near the tiny crazy town of Sema, California. It had to happen this way in the East Mojave Desert. It was a time of sacrifice. It was a time of heat and flame. 3 days for helicopter response. 3 days of just one hand crew. Wind and lightning, high humidity, the absence of rain. Dead August at Sema Dome, covered with expanses of juniper Joshua tree woodlands. Little touched over the years, supposedly protected by the Park Service, surrounded by mountain ranges, full of coyote and storied human landscape. Turning into a pandemic casualty, inmate crews sidelined, bigger fires raging elsewhere in the state. It didn't have to be so big, this extent of flame, but it had to burn. It had to be this big. The shuffling of responsibility for what should have been a routine small desert fire. covered by the crew at Hole in the Wall, cooled down with a Bambi water bucket of Helicopter 554 out of Apple Valley. You can chalk it up to climate change, of course, the many lightning strikes. Let's call it humanity's unquenchable thirst for swallowing up wild places and things, revealing the old trails from desert to sea, petroglyphs shimmering brighter on volcanic rocks, now more than ever before. Everything we should and need to know is here at the heart of this burn. Take heed. The next poem's a little funny, thanks, and a little weird, but these are all Mojave Desert poems. This is my beat, my thing. And basically, I definitely grew up in a crazy small town. Apple Valley, California was founded by Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. The town motif is a big statue of Trigger, which is now right in Apple Valley as you enter town. So imagine how that played on my imagination as a kid. And we actually used to see Roy and Dale all over town. Dale Evans did her own shopping. She was really nice, but very strange to grow up in that kind of place. Barely There, Barstow. Right after we got airborne in my 1966 VW van after finishing the peyote, 27 Februaries ago, with a 12-pack of Budweiser, I hiked all the way to the top of East Ord Mountain with 3 guys I knew from the fire crew. There was Kevin, who made almost $1 million growing marijuana in a hydroponic greenhouse. There was Tom, my boyfriend, who was strictly vegan and liked to take apart Volkswagen engines. There was Vince, Lakota Sioux Indian, often mistaken for Italian, the future daughter of my father. All day in the harsh desert sun and wind from desert floor to 6,000-foot rocky peak, we hiked and took turns firing Vince's AK-47 assault rifle. No bands on those back then. We knocked the tips from jagged rock tops as far as a mile away. I'm not gonna lie, it was fun. And near the mountaintop, we found a charred pair of bighorn sheep horns resting near a small cave. And they looked centuries old, probably from some fire that swept through here. We told each other, just some old animal that died here. Years later, a Chemehuevi Indian friend tells me this. Those burnt horns were placed there as an offering by a shaman. You discovered his dreams. He cried for us all. He touched the stars. Thank you. Am I out of time? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate reading and look forward to hearing everybody else's reading.
So much, Ruth. Oh my gosh, Apple Valley. Wow. What a place. Thank you so much. Okay, so our next speaker is Cindy.
Ooh. Hello. So Words Become Ashes, an Offering is my book. The most gorgeous cover designed by Mark Givens. Both sides are even gorgeous. I wrote all these poems and created the art during COVID and lockdown, but I was noticing that Bamboo Dart Press and Shrimper Records and they were producing this series and they kept publishing, and I had other publisher quit. Another one stopped publishing during this time. And I'm like, wow, they are going full on strong. And I want to be a part of that. And open to hybrid. So I'm really excited because I'm a fiber artist and poet that I could present both of these. So I'm going to start out with a poem called The Forest is Closed. I don't know if you can see the art a little bit. This is my art quilt. And I went to the small town of Wrightwood during COVID, the height of COVID. And I get there and I go to, so in Southern California, it's a place where you can ski in the mountains, not far from Los Angeles. And I arrive and I found this sign, the forest is closed. No one at the visitor's center since the forest is closed. I park across the street. Through treetops, I envision a being with a fox head, then bird. Underneath the mask, reveal a blonde woman floating. My grandmother I never knew? She crochets a coverlet, a cross, shows me other women crafting by hand, clothing, weavings, baskets, while they sit in a semicircle. I don't make a sound, fascinated by their skills. The other half circle consists of pines rustling in the wind. Branches reach down to shake my hand. Cones rest below. Sage and Indian paintbrush sprinkle the mountain's smoky light. One leaf scrapes and flips like a cartwheel. I discover oaks looming behind the pines. Great care selecting an acorn gift. Downy woodpecker, dark-eyed junco, and brewer's blackbird chorus the women. My heart pumps so hard it beats out of my chest. Grandmother sings. There's more than one way to see, to know. The shuttles pattern back and forth. I retrieve my heart and old wounds in Mars retrograde with Virgo new moon. Thank you. I was kind of hoping to go after Ruth because I found out that it was fire that closed the forest, a different fire. While I was there, and the reason I went there is that my loved one had serious surgery the night before. And because of COVID, I couldn't visit ever while he was there for 7 days. And I needed to just get out in nature, and it was just very difficult. But while I was there, I remember getting the first poem I shared with you, but then this poem, I still do not remember receiving it. Obviously, I wrote it down, and it's a prayer. I prayed it every day for months while he was healing. And this is the image. So that's the mystery and the craziness that can happen in a small place, is I really don't remember receiving this. I am not alone. Pine, oak, birds, flowers, women crafters in a circle connect to myself and to others. Ego is afraid. Burn that off to gain strength and wake up the inner fire. Set my life on fire. Let go of the pain and fear of the old story for a new story. Pivot. What deeply buried treasures are available to me? Visionary creator, truth teller, far seer. New wisdom to guide me. I am to share my treasures and gifts with others. Radiant. Focus on my power, wisdom, and beauty. Empowered. Resolution will come. Be still. Move in the body, shaking and fluttering my hands like leaves, like needles. Tree pose. Arms straight up, strong, balance. And I will let you know he's fine, but it was very difficult not to be able to be at his side. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Bamboo Dart Press.
Thanks so much, Cindy. That was great. Okay, everybody. There's Romaine is next. Take it away, Romaine.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody that's here. And Stephanie, thank you for that beautiful opening where you're the consummate teacher and you come sharing with us tidbits on how to continuously create and take what we have and make it blossom. As I was preparing, when we got this idea, I thought, oh, this is perfect, small town, because in my idea, in my book, Purgatory has an address, which has an anniversary coming up April 15th. Yay, 1 year anniversary. When you're a writer and you're constantly writing and you hear about the possibility to submit to somewhere, something that you have, you're like, how can I pull together what I have and present something that might be get the stamp of approval? So when this opportunity came about, I had been writing a lot of poems mourning my mom's passing, and I had a series of poems about that, and I'm from a closed adoption, and I had a series of poems about that, but I also had a series of poems about where I grew up because I was reconstructing my life. So I have a mini memoir in Purgatory Has an Address, and it's in 3 sections. Now, what I didn't do when we were talking about small towns is I didn't look at the population. And then right before I said, what is a small town? What's the population? I was like, ooh. Technically, I didn't grow up in a small town, but in reality, I did grow up in a small town. And I want to share why. I grew up in San Bernardino City, and I grew up in the city when it was one of the all-American cities, not the bankrupt city of 2015. And so I grew up where it was redlined. And as it being redlined, there were sections of San Bernardino where all African Americans, they strategically sold us property there, and separate from the rest of the larger San Bernardino. And in this redlined San Bernardino, we all knew each other. I could walk across the street. I could walk 2 blocks down, and my mom, go ask so-and-so for butter. My mom actually had a running account with one local business. And because it was redlined, it wasn't still Jim Crow era or I shouldn't call it Jim Crow, but segregation legal. But it took almost 15 years for all of that to slowly change. So even though the laws changed, it took a long time for that to change. There are pros and cons to that. And the pro or the positive that we hardly ever speak about is because we were redlined and we my mom was an insurance agent because they wouldn't allow African Americans to buy insurance. And so they had to have Black insurance companies sell to other Black people. So everybody knew my mom from going door to door to sell insurance. And so even though it was a large area, if you look at San Bernardino City, if you look at the population, my experience of being in a small town comes from the residual of redlining and not really understanding all of the financial particulars of it. It was really idyllic for me. We all knew each other. We all went to the same church. And if we went to different schools, we all knew which school. So I don't get into all of that because it's a little mini chapbook. So what I get into are the brief little things that I remember, like growing up next to a cow field and the farms and the Magnolia. One of the things that they did is they named all of our streets after presidents. And the main street going through there was Magnolia Avenue, Magnolia Street, and there's no magnolias on Magnolia Street. So even the naming of certain streets have a fascinating story behind them. So that's Purgatory Has an Address. That is the idea. So if you get in, you're like, wait, San Bernardino, that's not a small city. Hopefully putting it in the context of redlining will shed some light on that. And if we have a little bit of time later on, maybe I'll share a poem from there. But I just wanted to introduce you to Purgatory Has an Address. It's my heartbeat still. I'm continue to write, but I'm always going back to it. It's one of my favorites that I've written. And yeah, we can have favorites. So it's one of my favorites. And I hope that you've read it. And if you haven't, I hope you pick it up and if you read it, please visit me on my website, RomaineWashington.com, and we can have a conversation. You can invite me to come talk to your group or book club. So that's Purgatory Has an Address. Thank you, Bamboo Dart Press.
Thank you so much, Romaine. You make such, I think, a wonderful point of kind of asking, well, what is a small town? And how is it? Is it square miles, or is it how a neighborhood gets articulated, and kind of what that's such a powerful point, and you're making me think, okay, I need to think more about New York City, which is where I'm from. It was just really a series of little neighborhoods. So thank you so much. It was awesome. And gee, I wonder who is left. It's John Brantingham. John,
What a
take it
surprise.
away. What?
All right. Well, thank you. And Romaine, I have read your book and I have had you at my class, and I can tell everybody that she's a really wonderful guest. Please invite her. Okay, my name's John Brantingham. I'm a person who's obsessed with place, and I'm a writer who's obsessed with setting. That's really what I'm focusing on most of the time is setting. And I've lived both in big cities and in a lot of small towns. And I like both. What I like about the small town, though, is that this is called crazy happens in small towns, right? And I find that that's true. But what it really is I'm not distracted in a small town by the same things, and it's just that crazy happens in this universe, and I'm kind of more aware of it. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I was living in Three Rivers, California, which is in the High Sierra, and we went out for a late night hike. And it was the night that a Chinese satellite broke apart in the sky, and it was coming back to the ground and just broke into 17 distinct parts that lit up. I thought, coming from, I also live in cities. At first, I thought a police helicopter was pointing a spotlight down at us. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, that's probably not going to happen here. And then we looked up and watched this thing go. And it was the most like fill your senses kind of moment. And I got back to a few months later and I asked everybody if they'd seen the satellite, and nobody else had. It's like we were aware of it, and in a way that other people were. We also, every once in a while you'll see a rocket being shot off by near the ocean, which is a few hundred miles away. You see that. Anyway, I am I love small towns, and I love also how aware it makes me of the crazy shit happening inside of me as well. I find that when I'm in a large city, I'm just distracted. I don't think that's true for everyone, but when I'm in a large city, I think I'm more capable of evil, right? Because I'm not I'm distracted. I'm not focused. I can do these venial little awful things to other people that I'm around. And okay, so I wrote this book that oh, you can't see it. Oh no, Stephanie has it. Life Orange to Pear, and it's about somebody who's going through life aware and aware of his daughter. It's his relationship with his daughter. And I wanted to read it's a flash fiction collection. I want to read the last one, and I'm going to give you a spoiler. It's somebody's entire life cycle. The spoiler is that all people die, and that's what we have here at the end of his life cycle. This is called Pear. You're lying on the couch, pains shooting through you. Cindy's in the next room making tea and cutting up a pear. You figure you have 2 months more to live if the doctors are right, and you're guessing they are. This, it seems, is probably a moment for contemplation. And when you think back to childhood, you realize your best memory is that pear you had one day when you were 4 or 5. The flavor more complex than any other fruit you'd ever had. Your dad handed it to you. You must have been on a trip because there was snow on the ground, but you lived in California. Cindy comes in and puts the plate with a cut up pear on it, puts a plate with a cut up pear on the table next to you. And you say, I think my earliest memory was of a pear. Yeah, she says, the one Grandpa gave you when you were a kid. She places the tea next to you too. Why do you think I cut that one up for you? You shake your head. When did I tell you about that? You thought you'd forgotten about it until just now. She looks up at the popcorn ceiling. I don't know. I was pretty little. You handed me a pear and told me about it. It's one of my favorite memories. So all right, you think. That's it. That's the circle. The only thing left is to eat your fruit and let everything happen to you as it's going to happen. You must have worked through the other 4 stages, you suppose. So you pick up a slice and lift it to your nose. It smells of childhood and love. You bite into its complexity and think about nothing. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. I loved that point about the distractions question, and how the big city is distracting. Of course, as I said before, I'm from New York City originally, and I find living in a small town difficult. And I wonder if that's not part of the problem, is that I can't get distracted from the craziness in myself. I was like, oh, okay. I just think that's a really interesting and powerful point. And Pascal, the philosopher, talks about that. Distraction is very seductive because it keeps us from thinking about all the really serious stuff that's waiting for us. I just thought that was great. Thank you very much, everybody. My gosh. We're a big-ish group here. Thank you so much. And while we would love to answer your questions, if you could perhaps write them in the chat. And while you're doing that, I want to share some of the great questions that our group put together for me. And I'm going to ask you to I'm going to pose this question and then just kind of go around the panel room and ask you your thoughts. And this is actually Cindy's question. Cindy said, well, why should you approach, what's the benefit of approaching a small press in the first place? And I thought that might be a good question for us to start with. And so, John, you just spoke. What do you think of that? What are the advantages of approaching a small press?
Well, I think there's less of a burden to sell to a billion people. And so there's more focus on creativity and really creating something special and absolutely bizarre and wonderful and unique. And if we're talking, I was just talking about how crazy stuff happens in my mind. Well, I'm able to express that, and I'm able to talk directly to people who are my people, who understand, who get it, And so I love that about small press.
Thank you. And Cindy, would you like to answer your own question?
Sure. I started publishing with people who lived across the country. I'm in California, who did great jobs, but I never met them. They didn't set up readings because they found that places here didn't want out-of-state people setting up readings. And I just thought, I'd really like to be with a small press. Not only sets up the readings, but it gives me community. Like right here, all of the readers here are community with Bamboo Dart Press. And, we've done one reading a little bit together, but in the future, there will be readings as things open up. And I just really, that was important to me, to create community. And that happens with a small press. And also the creative freedom is fantastic. And you can work with, I had a solo show last July, and Mark got the book done in time because I was also doing a poetry reading. So I could get that done in less than a year. But community was really the big reason.
All right, thank you so much, Cindy. And I'm going to kind of just use what you said to kind of glide over to you, Ruth, because you had, your questions were very much organized around the community issue and also the creative expression issue. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about your story of working with the press on developing your project.
Yeah, like others have been saying here, working with Bamboo Dart and this particular small press, I just felt very welcomed and included, and very excited that they've agreed to publish my book. And I had sent my book originally, the manuscript had won the first runner-up award for the 2021 Hillary Grabendijk Prize, which is a regional poetry contest sponsored by the Inlandia Institute. And so since I wasn't the winner, I was first runner-up, so I was left, I'm looking for my own publisher for the book. And Mark Gibbons of Bamboo Dart was just so welcoming and just said, send me your manuscript. And they read it and they had suggestions, which I thought was great. and we're very supportive, and also I feel conducive in actually helping me evolve the manuscript just a little bit to kind of strengthen some of the themes of wildfire and the different ways I can explore that topic in literal time and also in a metaphoric sense, and how that touches on climate change and, you know, social and environmental justice issues, and just a lot of different things stemming from that one. So the process of working with a small press, they've just been very accessible, which I really value. Like a lot of other presses, you're waiting for 3 months, you know, or whatever,
Right.
even just an answer, are you going to publish my work? Or so that's been a wonderful aspect of the small press.
Yeah. So Ruth, it sounds like you had a fair amount of back and forth with Mark, I guess, about the project.
A little bit, not too much. Mark had given me some feedback, just some ideas for how to maybe unify the manuscript a little bit in terms of what Bamboo Dart was looking for, which I really appreciate.
Right.
And I've been like embarrassed to admit I've been laboring over, I got really distracted with life and work and some tragedy also in my life in the last number of weeks. But this reading is definitely giving me some focus to really get it done. And Mark, you know, it's coming. So I keep saying, I'm like really embarrassed. I should have been to him weeks ago, but I'm almost there. So it hasn't been too long. It's just Mark's waiting for me to send back based on his initial.
But I think you just touched on another really important point, is that when you have this kind of a relationship with a publisher, you can say, well, here's the feedback. Oh, I need a little bit more time. Okay. Yeah. There's that kind of give and take, which
I think that's really important, especially in this time, you know, this last few years with COVID and so much affecting all of our lives and disruptions and, you know, destabilized everything. And it's wonderful to have a small press publisher completely be flexible as well.
Yeah. And Ruth, while you're talking, I just want you to know that Mark, the publisher, is saying in the chat, never a need to apologize for life getting in the way. Life is always most important. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I saw that too. And in fact, you know, this is actually, I know for me and maybe a lot of writers, it's the fabric of what's happening to us. You know, this manuscript actually has evolved a little bit because it's taken a little more time. And I feel like I have a little more emotional, you know, based on just what I've experienced in the last few months. So it's not really a dead time when we have to step away from finishing a project. We can see that as another dimension of what we're trying to accomplish that will actually add more. And I think a small press, especially Mark, you know, is going to be really demonstrated that he's really understands that and is still very supportive, not punitive, you know, you missed the deadline, too bad, you know. And I think that means a lot to a lot of us writers. It's really important.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Romaine, what are your thoughts about what do you think are the advantages of working with a small press?
It's interesting because I can't compare it to working with a large press because I haven't done that, but I can tell you the things that I really enjoy is the ability to communicate and get a response. It's not like you are on hold and you're waiting. There was, I have a question, I would get a response. I was able to say, and this is my second small press book. And for both of them, the cover was a collaborative thing, and that was wonderful. My son's an artist, and in the first book, some of his art is sprinkled throughout. And in this book, the cover is, my son did the cover. And in both of them, both of my sons have small, kind enough to put small verse from my younger son. So he's in there too. So it's become this little family affair with both of the chapbooks that I've had published in small press. And I also feel very connected and a loyalty. And it's not a financial loyalty, but an emotional loyalty for the support that I've gotten from a small press, because I know the person, I see the person and the work that they're doing. And small press is, I don't want to ramble on too long, but it's just such a labor of love. And so there comes with it such an appreciation of the work that's gone into it. So those are some of the things that I've just really have a great respect for small presses.
Thank you so much. I love your point about the labor of love. And everybody, if you haven't experienced these books in the real yet, they are really just very, very beautifully designed books. I think it was somebody from an indie publisher who's now kind of a big deal. I think it was Soft Skull actually that I met with. This was when I was circulating at AWP, and the publisher said, if you're going to go to the trouble to making the codex, which is a lot of work now to make an actual book, you really want to make it beautiful. And I think Bamboo Dart Press and Pelekinesis really take that job seriously. It's like, if we're going to make something, we really want it to be beautiful. I just wanted to chime in on my experience, because Cindy's question was, why approach a small press? And my immediate response when I saw that question was, well, because you can approach them. Because you can find somebody to talk to. You can email somebody and someone will write back. I had this really cool experiences with getting to know Mark and then later Dennis. I met Mark through Jo Scott Coe, who is a Pelekinesis author, and you can hear her talk tomorrow night at 6, along with Tim Hatch and Juanita, and Romaine will be back, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody else terribly important. But please forgive me if I've forgotten you. I love you, and you'll talk to me later. I met him with Jo, and Mark had to do all this stuff at the AWP book fair, and I did too. And so we became sort of book fair buddies. And Mark, I don't know if you remember this, but it was so great to have you along, because it's a very intimidating affair, the AWP book fair, because it's enormous. And so we were kind of walking up to places. I went to N+1 with Mark standing next to me, and I said, what do I need to do to publish something with you? And had a little conversation with them. And then he went off and did something. And then we joined back up at this t-shirt place. And we actually started talking about Dada and how much we loved the Dadaists. And I just liked Mark so much. I thought, he's a really nice guy. We've got, I share his aesthetic with the Dada stuff. I totally am down with that. And so I kind of knew him long before the BDP, kind of thing came to be. But I really think there's a lot to be said for meeting people and talking to people in writer world. And I think as so many of us are still working full time, we have kids, we have parents, we have dogs, and so there's the tendency to think, I don't have time to do that. But that's where I've had my best experiences, is going to going to the book fair, or going to a side reading at AWP. It was at that same AWP that I went to a reading because a friend of mine was going. And I got to hear Ilya Kaminsky read. And I looked down the side and saw a poet that I've always admired. And I got to meet him, and that's Anis Mojani, who of course became and is now Oregon Poet Laureate. So I got to have all these experiences, and that's how I got to know Mark. So I knew I wanted to work with him on something because he was just such a cool guy. So I'll stop talking because I'm answering this question for much too long. I'm looking in the chat to see if there are any questions. I don't see any yet, but so I'm going to turn to some of the questions that you all had. I was interested, and I think Ruth, this was also your question, is how does a small press support its authors in helping to publicize their work? And I'm thinking, who hasn't spoken in a while? Cindy, how has Bamboo Dart Press sort of supported you?
Mark shares on Facebook anytime I post that I'm doing a reading or even an art reception. And I love that he, continues to support. I published my book last July, and just to have that continued support and community again Cindy's out here doing this. She's one of my authors. And so he supports both the art and the poetry. And I just love that. So that's, right now, I mean, things are just opening up again. So I'm sure there will be other ways, but, during this time where we're online still a lot, I just noticed Marcus right there, and he's right there. He I know he's publishing lots of books and has a life, but he shares. And so I just appreciate that continued support. It's not like you've published, you're done, you're gone kind of thing, which can happen again with larger publishers. It just continues. And there is a question in the chat, just so you know.
Yes, thank you very much, Cindy. Yeah, I saw it for once. I usually don't see the chat, but this time I did. Thank you. MJ Kerper wants to know, does the author keep their copyright? And my understanding is, yes, we do. We retain the copyright on this work. Thank you. That's a great question. And Mark, if that's wrong, you'll need to tell us all, but I'm assuming that's correct. Okay, we've got a few more minutes left. And so, John asked this question, which is, and it's a question that I think you should ask when you're talking to any press, big or small, is what is my job as the author when I'm working with you? And so, John, I'm gonna ask you to answer your own question. What do you think your responsibility is to a small press?
Well, I think you have to be there for them the way that they're there for you. And that this person on the other side has done so much work, has put so much of themselves into your book. You should be out there promoting and doing whatever. There's only so much that a publisher can do, small or large press. They can maybe set up a reading, but when you show up to that reading, you have to be the person you're supposed to be. You have to be proactive. You have to be responsive to them. And you have to, I think also just like any other relationship, you have to be a good person in the relationship. You can't be toxic. So, I mean, like copying an attitude or anything like that, just making sure that you respond to the person you're working with, that person, you're maintaining a good relationship. I personally want to sell a lot of books for my publisher. I think that's part of my responsibility. It's hard to do. I don't always do a very good job of that because it's just difficult. But you should be there. I don't think you should like have your book and then kind of disappear and say, well, you should go off and sell that product now. So yeah, I think you have a lot of responsibility. I think it's the same as any other business relationship. You've got a responsibility to just kind of do your job.
I think that's a great point. Note to self, don't be a toxic author. Don't be that person where everyone goes, oh no, not them.
It happens. It does.
It does indeed happen. Romaine and Ruth, what are your thoughts about what our responsibilities are to our small press?
I absolutely agree with what John was saying. And I think there's a misconception as a writer that sometimes you write and you get published and ta-da, that's it. And then that it's somebody else's responsibility, but not at all. You are still, it's like having a child, and you just don't like have a child and say, ta-da. You have to walk it through and you have to introduce it to different things. And so, when doors open up for you to have a platform as an indie author with a book, you show up. And you show up and you say, yes, this is the gift that I have to share. And you make yourself available and enjoy that process. Allow yourself to enjoy the process as much as writing or editing or seeing the finished product. I absolutely agree, though. We do have a responsibility to, I will say this, my first book, I never had a website before. And the reason why I got a website was because I had a book. And when I had a book, I thought, okay, how can I help my publishers sell these books? How can I make myself have more of a presence? And so everything that I've done, a lot of the things that I've done that I normally wouldn't have done is because of the books. So, yeah.
Thank you. Ruth, what about you?
Well, one thing I like about the small press thing is that I just feel like authors have a lot more ability to participate in their own publications in terms of, your publishers back east, and maybe they're setting things up, or maybe they're not setting things up. One of the books I published, for a little while, they were setting things up, and then they just kind of dropped and like weren't even interested in my book. And it's been kind of weird ever since that. Just feeling disconnected, not really part of the press, or even having to buy books from them. It's just very strange. But the small press idea, I think, is another way that gives us an ability to create more events in our own communities, which would be, we're doing a lot virtually now, but I'm thinking there's so many places just here in the region that all of us except for John are in, and Stephanie, the Inland Empire and desert regions. I know that my area out here is really underserved with literary, Mojave Desert. Even the Coachella Valley just doesn't have a lot of do-it-yourself stuff. So as an author, I just had seen Juanita Mance, one of our good friends who self-published, or hasn't self-published, she's published with Los Nietos Press, and she set up a reading with her book at Barnes and Noble, and just got a lot of people in the store involved and was able to make that connection. So I definitely see a small press as supporting authors to do their own events, not feel like you have to wait for somebody to give you the okay to do it, but you yourself have license. And this is how more voices that are important are getting out there. So the small press, a vehicle, easy to reach the publisher, easy to get copies of our book. We feel supported. As Cindy said, I'm excited to know that Bamboo Dart is, promoting events that even their authors are doing, because that's how we build a literary community and a publishing community. And that's pretty much what I'm all about, is building communities for people with writing and literature. So I think it's really essential. And that, there's not these gatekeepers in New York, and we have to get their permission to have a book or even have an event. We get to be a lot more involved, and I love that. That's important to me as a writer. And also an audience to hear other people, like the other Bamboo Dart people being published. Right. I want to hear your work. I don't just want to read what comes out of the New York Times list. That's important, but what we're doing is really important as well.
Well, thank you,
Maybe
Ruth.
more important in some ways.
I think that that's a great point, and it's again for folks in the room who are new to publishing or new to thinking about publishing, that the onus, which always sounds so frightening because it's Latin, the responsibility is with you to all seek out opportunities and create events. But I would point out that that's increasingly the case for all authors. When I was talking to my very briefly, my former student, Alex Espinoza, who's quite an important writer and has an endowed chair at UC Riverside now, he had issues promoting I think it was his second novel, which is fabulous, which is about a young man, Latino, trying to break into the movies. His editor at a big publisher, I don't remember which one, his editor left and wasn't able to really promote the book. And so it remains one of his lesser known books. So we're increasingly, whether you've got an agent and whatever you've got, we're all increasingly kind of in a situation where we need to promote ourselves, which is why one particular makes, I think, community interaction so important. We are almost at 5 o'clock, so I'm going to ask each one of you for a final word of wisdom. Cindy, you haven't talked in a while. Final word of wisdom.
Keep writing, and go out into community as things are opening up, and share, because it's an opportunity. One of the things I love the most is encouraging new writers to also keep writing and creating. And I have loved this hour with everyone, and thank you all that came.
Thanks, Cindy. John, what about you? Final word of wisdom.
Okay, so we're talking about publishing. We're talking about press. I think a lot of people, when they're publishing, they're looking to see if they're right. They write for the press. The real question they're asking is, am I a terrible person? And you shouldn't be dwelling on that sort of thing. And if you find yourself being tortured by that stuff, that's really the question you're asking. And I'm going to answer that question for you. You are not a terrible person. You're a wonderful person. Your words are full of wisdom, and we want to hear them. So please send your stuff out.
Thank you, John. Romaine, what about you?
I agree with everybody. Let's see.
That's very wise.
Words of wisdom. Just keep writing and keep reading. I know that sounds old, but yeah, keep writing, keep reading, keep writing, keep reading. Once you get published, promote, keep writing, keep reading. Just it's just a cycle. I don't have anything new, just in supporting what everybody else said.
Well, thank you so much. Ruth, take us out with a final word of wisdom.
Just one word? No.
A sentence, too, if you want.
Write what you know and be true to yourself. When I teach creative writing at the college I teach at, my main goal is, I want to hear your voice. We're developing your voice, your story. And my role as a teacher is to help evoke that, help bring it out. My job is not to teach voice. So voice, one's own story, being honest and true and sincere, and writing what you know and who you are and what you are, even if it's coming through a creative fabric where you're imagining things. And that's really going to come through to readers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Amazing.
Thank
Bamboo
you,
Dart
Stephanie.
authors. You bet.
you, Stephanie.
Great.
Thanks, Stephanie.
I love when I've got the bag, I just feel so happy. So you guys
Yeah.
were amazing. And thank you so much to everybody who came. We're happy to answer questions individually. I think you have ways to contact all of us. And thank you so much for coming. Don't forget to attend the next event tomorrow night at 6 p.m. And that will be the Bamboo Dart Pelekinesis 2.
6 p.m. in California or New York?
That's a really good question.
I think it's California.
It's California.
I can answer that question.
California time.
Yeah.
It is California time.
Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to make it.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, you all. We're going to stop recording. And Larry, it's time to end the meeting.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you again.
Thank you.